I am Ashna Gupta from EPG Pathshala. The name of the module is Psychological Assessment and Criminal Profiling. With this module, you will be able to learn the introduction to criminal profiling, know about the fundamentals and techniques of criminal profiling, and learn about the criminal generating process. Introduction. Criminal profiling is a subdiscipline of forensic criminology. It is a discipline within criminology rooted in the behavioral sciences and forensic sciences alike. Thus, it is vital that students seeking to develop the skill of profiling educate themselves properly and thoroughly in scientific methodology and the behavioral sciences. Criminal profiling involves making inferences about the habitual, physical, emotional, psychological, and even vocational characteristics of criminals. However, there are many different methods of criminal profiling and all vary with respect to the soundness of underlying theory, logic, and insight. Some methods are general, abstract, and trait predictive. Others are specific, concrete, and state descriptive. Some rely on offender group statistics, and some rely solely on experience, and some rely on examining case-specific behavioral evidence. Criminal psychological profiling is the technique of analyzing the behavioral patterns of a crime or series of crime in order to primarily construct a descriptive pattern of the probable offender. Criminal profiling has been used successfully by the law enforcement in the several areas and is a valuable tool to narrow the field of investigation. Profiling does not provide the specific identity of the offender, rather it indicates the description of the probable offender by focusing on certain behavioral and personality characteristics. Example, age, sex, marital status, and employment status. As used by FBI profilers, the criminal profile generating process is defined as a technique for identifying the major personality and behavioral characteristics of an individual based upon an analysis of the crimes he or she has committed. The profiler's skill is the recognizing the crime scene dynamics that link various criminal personality types who commit similar crimes. Profiling techniques have been used in various settings such as hostage taking. Law enforcement officers need to learn as much as possible about the hostage taker in order to protect the lives of the hostages. In such cases, police are aided by verbal contact with the offender and possibly by access to his family and friends. They must be able to access the subject in terms of what course of action he is likely to take and what is his reaction to various stimuli might be. Profiling has been also used in identifying anonymous letter writers and persons who make spoken or written threats of violence. In cases of the latter, psycholinguistic techniques have been used to create a threat dictionary, whereby every word in a message is assigned by computer to a specific category. Words as they are used in threat messages are then compared with those words as they are used in ordinary speech or writings. The vocabulary usage in the message may yield signature words unique to the offender. In this way, police may not only be able to determine that several letters were written by the same individual, but also to learn about the background and the psychology of the offender. Rapists and firebombers also lend themselves to profiling techniques. Through careful interview of the rape victim about the rapist's behavior, investigator begins to build a profile of the offender. The rationale behind this approach is that behavior reflects personality. By examining behavior, the investigator may be able to determine what type of person is responsible for the offense. Knowledge of these characteristics can help the investigator in identifying possible subjects and in developing techniques and strategies for interviewing them. However, studies in this area have focused on specific categories of offenders and are not yet generalizable to all offenders. Criminal profiling has been found to be useful in crimes such as serial sexual homicides. These crimes create a great deal of fear because of their apparently motiveless and random nature, and they are also given high publicity. Consequently, the investigators are under immense public pressure to apprehend the criminal as quickly as possible. At the same time, these crimes may be the most difficult to solve precisely because of their apparent randomness. An analysis of the similarities and differences among victims of a particular serial murderer provides an important information concerning the motive in an apparently motiveless crime. This may yield information about the criminal himself or herself. For example, the murderer may be the result of the sadistic fantasy in the mind of the murderer, and a particular victim may be targeted because of the symbolic aspect of the fantasy. In this context, criminal profiling has been productive, particularly in those crimes where the offender has demonstrated repeated patterns at the crime scene. Methodology. The method of the criminal profiling that one claims to use will dictate the education necessary to use it. This methodology must be clearly and unambiguously defined. If a profiler does not know or cannot explain the method he or she is using to perform his or her experiment examinations and reach his or her conclusions, then those conclusions can hardly be considered professional, reliable, or even acceptable. The professional criminal profiler deals with facts and evidence, not assumptions and emotional magnification. A profiler's method of choice will therefore be objective and necessarily rooted in the tenets of the scientific method. The best criminal profiling texts are those that provide insight into criminal investigation and behavioral evidence by fusing real-world case experiences, relevant behavioral and forensic science scholarship, and the scientific method. They provide tools, set limits, and don't leave the reader with the impression that criminal profiling is the domain of a select few. If a criminal profiler is using a heuristic method of his or her own without clear and consistent terms, definitions, and practice standards, it signals a lack of professionalism and accountability. It also demonstrates the absence of scientific education and training. This is not desirable, as the mandates of good science, example objectivity, the scientific method, and transparency are also crucial to professionalization. Skill identification and development. Given a clear and identifiable profiling methodology, the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for the competent performance should become evident. This information can then be used to identify the necessary course of education, training, and experiences required to develop those skills and abilities. It will also allow for the development of professional competency tests to assess whether basic thresholds of knowledge have been achieved and are being maintained. Education. The development of a firm base of theoretical knowledge and its practical application can often be found in a formal college or university education. Successful completion of a degree program demonstrates the ability to commit to a long-term course of study and to see it through the completion. It is evidence to others regarding one's professional dedication and personal determinations. Therefore, less formal education is not better. However, too much college or university education of low quality can be worse, especially when it is not honed by actual experience with crime, criminals, and victims. It should go without saying that criminal profiling involves the application of the behavioral sciences to criminology. Given this fundamental intersection of applied knowledge, it is hard to argue that one can be qualified behavioral analyst if one does not possess a formal education in at least one of the behavioral sciences, example, psychology, sociology, criminology, or social work. Too many criminal profilers still fail this basic litmus test, yet offer their services as though such a foundation is irrelevant. A criminal profiler's final educational path should be dictated by the method that he or she intends to use. If the profiler intends to use a method that involves statistical analysis, she or he must have a format education that involves mathematics and statistics. If she or he intends to engage in scientific practice, he or she must have a formal education that features understanding and applying the scientific method. If the profiler wishes to examine and reconstruct crime scene behavior, he or she must study forensic science. Formal education provides the theoretical foundation required to give their eventual internships and work experience meaning. Experience. Experience is important to the development of knowledge, skills and abilities. Criminal profilers must gain experience being correct, being incorrect and being corrected. In this way, they can learn how they recognize when they are wrong, how to self-correct and how to express scientific humility. Experience is accumulated from formal internships, mentoring, on-the-job training and of course from life in general. However, the experiences accumulated must be relevant, and for them to have any value, they must be informed by outside knowledge and sound theory. This is why formal education must come first. For example, police officers often stand watch over crime scene security. This does not mean that they have knowledge and experience related to the investigating crime unless they are performing the duties of a detective. More experience standing watch over scene security will not teach them to be good investigators. Detectives, on the other hand, often attend and witness the autopsy in cases of homicide. However, this does not mean that they are qualified to perform the autopsy, as they do not have the same education, training and background as the forensic pathologist. Their job as witnesses to the autopsy is not the same as the forensic psychopathologist's job in performing it. And each is educated and trained to take different things away from the experience. In addition, there is issue of quantity versus quality. Dr. Paul L. Kirk in 1902 to 1970, the father of modern forensic science, offered the following thought. I quote, "The amount of experience is unimportant beside the question of what has been learned from it. If one does not learn from experience and repeats the same errors time and time again, then experience has little meaning. Someone may have been doing their job for 20 years, but it may also be same of errors repeated 20 times. Another concern regarding experience is that it is used as a shield to argue the soundness and veracity of conclusions. This is actually a logical fallacy referred to as an appeal to authority. When a purported professional offers a conclusion based solely on the authority or expertise of themselves or others, their logic and reasoning is without solid foundation. Behavioral evidence analysis, BAE. In order to completely and effectively execute the method of examination and classification provided in this text in relation to behavioral evidence analysis, the following education and training are required. 1. An undergraduate degree in a behavioral science, for example, psychology, sociology, criminology, or social work. This will provide an understanding of human behavior and related behavioral theory, and will also provide exposure to the scientific method. A criminal justice degree is not the same as a criminology degree, and most CJ programs will only prepare you for a career in law enforcement or corrections. 2. Undergraduate term papers. Many undergraduate courses allow students to choose term paper research subject. As much as possible, research and write on subjects related to criminal profiling and related specialized areas of interest. 3. A graduate degree in forensic science or a behavioral science. As just about anyone can get an undergraduate degree, graduate work signals a professional level of commitment to your career. Students should choose a graduate program by seeking to study under someone who both published in the area of interest and also still has a hand in casework. Professional scholars without real world experience make for poor teachers. They also lack the ability to help students get good internships. 4. Graduate term papers. Many graduate courses allow students to choose term papers, research subjects. As much as possible, research and write on subjects related to criminal profiling and related specialized areas of interest. 5. Graduate thesis. It should go without saying that in any graduate level, thesis should be written on a subject related to criminal profiling in same fashion, specifically oriented towards the student's specialized areas of interest. This presupposes that the student by this time has developed specialized areas of interest. 6. Graduate internships. Seek an internship that exposes you directly to the criminal justice system and its inhabitants. This can include a group home, the public defender's office, an ME or coroner's office, or a law enforcement agency. Multiple internships are recommended for the broadest exposure. Even when college credit is not available, internships are still recommended. If your college or university program cannot offer you good internship possibilities, you are in the wrong program. With this formal educational background, the students will be well suited to begin learning and eventually to apply BEA methodology in any career they decide to take up within or related to the criminal justice system. Bear in mind that it is a skill, not a job. The skill may be used in a career as an investigator, paralegal lawyer, social worker, forensic examiner, or a mental health expert. The criminal generating process. The criminal profile generating process is styled as having 5 main stages within a 6th stage or goal being apprehension of a subject. 3.1. Profiling input stage. The profiling input stage initiates the criminal profiling generating process. Comprehensive case resources are essential for accurate profiling. Complete background information on the victim is also vital in homicide profiles. The data should cover domestic setting, reputation, hobbies, physical condition, employment, habits, fears, personality, criminal history, family relationships, and social conduct. Forensic information concerning to the crime is also critical to the profiling process, including an autopsy report with toxicology, serology results, autopsy photographs, and photographs of the cleaned wounds. The report should also comprise of the medical examiner's findings and impressions regarding type of weapon, estimated time and cause of death, and suspected sequence of delivery of wounds. Also useful are crime scene sketches showing distances, directions and scale, as well as maps of the area which may cross law enforcement boundaries. 3.2. Decision process model stage. The decision process begins by organizing and arranging the inputs into meaningful patterns. Third, crime assessment stage. This stage involves the reconstruction of the sequence of events and the behavior of both the offender and victim. Based on the various decisions of the previous stage, this reconstruction of how things happened, how people behaved, and how they planned and organized the encounter provides information about specific characteristics to be generated for the criminal profile. Assessments are made about the classification of the crime, its organized, disorganized aspects, the offender selection of a victim, strategies used to control the victim, the sequence of the crime, the performance or not of the crime, the offender's motivation for the crime scene dynamics. The classification of the crime is determined through the decision process outlined in the first decision process model. Motivation. It is a difficult factor to judge because it requires dealing with the inner thoughts and behavior of the offender. Motivation is more easily determined in the organized offender who plans and has the ability to carry out a plan of action that is logical and complete. On the other hand, the disorganized offender carries out his crimes by motivations that frequently are derived from mental illnesses and accompanies distorted thinking resulting from delusions and hallucinations. Drugs and alcohol, as well as panic and stress resulting from disruptions during the execution of the crime, are factors which must be considered in the overall assessment of the crime scene. Crime scene dynamics. Crime scene dynamics are the numerous elements common to every crime scene which must be interpreted by investigating officers that are at times easily misunderstood. Examples include location of crime scene, cause of death, method of killing, positioning of the body, excessive trauma, and location of wounds. Thus, the process used by an investigative profiler in developing a criminal profile is quite similar to that used by clinicians to make a diagnosis and treatment plan. Data is collected and assessed, the situation reconstructed, hypothesis is formulated, a profile is developed and tested, and the results are reported. Investigators traditionally have learned profiling through brainstorming, intuition, and educated guesswork. Their expertise is the result of years of accumulated wisdom, extensive experience, and the field, the familiarity with the large number of cases. A profiler brings to the investigation the ability to make hypothetical formulations based on his or her previous experience. A formulation is defined here as a concept that organizes, explains, or makes investigative sense out of the information and that influences the profile hypothesis. These formulations are based on clusters of information emerging from crime scene data and from the investigator's experience in understanding criminal actions. A basic premise of criminal profiling is that the way a person thinks that directs the person's behavior. Thus, when the investigative profiler analyzes a crime scene and notes certain critical factors, she or he may be able to determine the motive and type of person who committed the scene. Criminal profile stage. The fourth stage in generating a criminal profile deals with the type of person who committed the crime and that individual's behavior organization with relation to the crime. Once this description is generated, the strategy of investigation can be formulated, as this strategy requires a basic understanding of how an individual will respond to a variety of investigative efforts. Included in the criminal profile are background information, physical characteristics, habits, beliefs, and values, pre-offense behavior leading to the crime, and the post-offense behavior. It may also include investigative recommendations for interrogating or interviewing, identifying, and apprehending the offender. This fourth stage has an important means of validating the criminal profile. Feedback number 1. The profile must fit with the earlier reconstruction of the crime, with the evidence, and with the key decision process models. In addition, the investigative procedure developed from the recommendations must make sense in terms of expected response patterns of the offender. If there is lack of congruence, the investigative profilers review all available data, as Hercule Poirot observed. I quote, "To know is to have all the evidence and the facts fit into place," I unquote. Investigation stage. Once the congruence of the criminal profiling is determined, a written report is provided to the requesting agency and added to its ongoing investigative efforts. The investigative recommendations generated in stage 4 are applied and suspects matching the profile are evaluated. If identification, apprehension, and a confession result, the goal of this profile effort has been met. If new evidences is generated, example by another murder, and or there is no identification of a subject, re-evaluation occurs via feedback 2. The information is re-examined and the profile is re-validated. Apprehension stage. Once a suspect is apprehended, the agreement between the outcome and the various stages in the profile generating process are examined. When an apprehended suspect admits guilt, it is important to conduct a detailed interview to check the total profiling process for validity. Summary. Criminal personality profiling has proven to be a useful tool to law enforcement in solving violent, apparently motiveless crimes. The process has aided significantly in the solution of many cases over the past decade. It is believed that through the research efforts of personnel in the FBI National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crimes and professionals in other fields, the profiling process will continue to be refined and be a viable investigative aid to law enforcement. Thank you for joining.